The forest stretched endlessly, a tangled sea of pines and shadows that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. The hiker's boots crunched against the leaf-strewn path, each step echoing in the eerie silence that settled over the dense woodland. Sunlight filtered weakly through the canopy, casting shifting patterns that seemed to dance and twist with intent. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth, moss, and the faint tang of decay, an aroma that hinted at the secrets the forest kept hidden. He had started his trek with confidence, familiar with maps and trails, yet an uneasy sensation began to creep in almost immediately, gnawing at the edges of his mind. The markers that had guided him vanished inexplicably, painted signs and carved notches swallowed by undergrowth or obscured by the twisting shadows of trees. Every turn revealed paths that seemed vaguely familiar, yet subtly altered, as if the forest itself had shifted overnight, rearranging its interior to confuse and trap him. Birdsong was absent here. Not even the rustle of small creatures broke the silence. Occasionally, a distant crack of a branch underweight not his own made him pause, every fiber of his being alert. The path behind him appeared the same as before, yet an instinctive dread whispered that it no longer led back to the world he had left. His footsteps quickened, but the rhythm of the forest seemed to match him, synchronizing, observing, guiding him toward something unseen. He noticed the fog first in subtle wisps, curling along the forest floor, barely perceptible, clinging to roots and rocks. Then it thickened inexplicably, a white blanket that distorted his vision and made familiar landmarks vanish. The trees loomed larger now, their trunks twisted unnaturally, bark scarred with shapes that resembled faces frozen in silent screams. Each shadow seemed longer, reaching out as though the forest itself were testing the edges of his resolve. Time began to lose meaning. What felt like minutes stretched into hours. The sun, though high, cast shadows that lengthened impossibly. Every step forward brought him back to intersections he didn't recognize, forks in the trail that had no place in the map he carried. His breath became shallow, heart hammering in response to the inexplicable pattern of unease pressing against him. Then he heard it. A faint murmur, almost imperceptible, like wind through leaves but with cadence, a rhythm that suggested something aware of his presence. The sound moved with him, rising when he paused, falling when he ran, always just beyond the limits of perception. He told himself it was his imagination, yet instinct screamed otherwise. The whispers seemed to originate from everywhere and nowhere, threading between trees, brushing at the edges of his consciousness. He stumbled over roots and rocks that had not been there moments before, the forest's floor subtly shifting beneath his feet. Panic pressed in, a cold, creeping weight that made him aware of every inhale and exhale. His map offered no solace. Landmarks had changed, and the trail markers were gone, swallowed into foliage or mist. The forest was closing in, or perhaps he had wandered into a place that existed outside of time, a labyrinth of wood and shadow designed to trap the unwary. As he moved cautiously forward, he glimpsed figures at the corner of his vision, shapes that melted into the trees when looked at directly, shadows without bodies, movements without source, watching him from the periphery. The whispers grew louder, almost forming words he could not understand, a chorus of intent, pressing against his mind, guiding him deeper into the woods, away from anything familiar. By dusk, the path had vanished entirely. Rocks, roots, and gnarled tree trunks blocked every direction he remembered. The fog thickened, curling at his legs like tendrils, and the shadows seemed to pulse with anticipation. He realized fully, with a surge of cold terror, that he was no longer following a trail. He had entered the forest's domain, a place that existed only to test, to watch, and to claim those who dared wander too far. And somewhere ahead, in the thickening fog and gathering shadows, he felt eyes, innumerable, patient, eternal, waiting for him to make the next step. Night fell gradually, yet the forest seemed impervious to ordinary time, shadows stretching and folding in ways that defied reason. The hiker's torch flickered weakly, casting thin beams that illuminated gnarled roots and twisted branches, yet revealed little else. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig, carried an unnatural weight, a sense that the forest was aware of his every movement, cataloging him, assessing him. Then he heard the whispers, subtle at first, curling through the trees like a breeze, unintelligible syllables threading between the trunks, brushing at the edges of his mind. They rose and fell with rhythm, almost musical, yet broken, urgent, and hollow. Every attempt to focus on them brought only a deeper sense of unease, as if the forest were speaking in a language not meant for human ears, a language designed to entrap. He tried to call out, his own voice sounding alien in the thick night air, swallowed immediately by the trees. The fog rose further, curling around his legs, clinging to his clothing, making every movement sluggish, deliberate. Shapes appeared at the edge of his vision, elongated shadows twisting unnaturally around tree trunks, vanishing when he turned to face them. The whispers grew louder, layering upon one another, a symphony of intent that pressed against his consciousness. Every familiar landmark he had relied upon disappeared. Rocks and roots shifted subtly, forming patterns that seemed deliberate, guiding him down trails that did not exist on any map. He stumbled, catching on a root that had seemingly appeared out of nowhere, and the whispers pulsed sharply, a near hiss that made his skin crawl. The forest was alive in a way that transcended ordinary explanation. Each tree, each shadow, each flicker of fog a part of a calculated, patient design. He reached a clearing, where the mist hung thick and low, obscuring the forest floor entirely. The whispers coalesced here, louder, urgent, a chorus of voices threading through the night. Come, stay watch, lost. The sound vibrated within his chest, pressing directly on his thoughts, filling him with the chilling sensation that he was being guided toward something, or away from something he was not meant to find. Figures began to appear in the fog, indistinct at first, shapes of humans perhaps, yet elongated and shifting, bending unnaturally. They moved silently, circling him, never touching, always watching. Shadows pooled beneath their forms, merging with the forest floor, crawling forward like sentient smoke. Each step he took was mirrored by the whispers and the subtle shifting of these forms, an unholy rhythm that synchronized with his own heartbeat. He forced himself forward, stepping cautiously over roots and rocks that seemed to shift underfoot, compelled by an instinct that conflicted violently with his terror. The whispers intensified, overlapping, threading into his mind directly. Do not leave, forever. Belong, watch. Every rational thought fled as the forest sentience pressed upon him. He realized that he was no longer merely a visitor. He had become part of the forest's design, a piece of a living maze of shadows and intent. A sudden, sharp sound, a twig snapping close, made him whirl, torch slicing through the fog. Nothing visible remained, yet he felt it, the presence, patient, eternal, observing him, gauging his resolve. The whispers surged one final time as he stepped deeper into the clearing, an invisible hand pressing him forward, into the forest's heart, where trails, time, and reality itself no longer held meaning. He understood in that moment that the forest did not merely shelter the lost. It shaped them, trapped them, claimed them, and somewhere, just beyond sight, the figure of another hiker, or what remained of one, watched silently, a warning he could not read, and would never forget. The hiker's pace quickened, each step cautious yet frantic, as the forest seemed to constrict around him. Shadows shifted with impossible fluidity, stretching from one tree to another, merging with the fog to create forms that were almost human, yet disturbingly wrong. His heart pounded in his chest, and the whispers, now constant, insistent, threaded directly into his thoughts, urging him forward, yet warning him simultaneously. Then he heard it, footsteps, faint, deliberate, echoing softly on the forest floor, matching his own rhythm almost perfectly. He froze, torch trembling in his hand, sweeping the beam across the mist-shrouded path. Nothing, only the gnarled roots, the twisted trunks, the fog curling around him like fingers. Yet the sound persisted, following him, circling him, never revealing its source. He quickened his steps, adrenaline surging, Yet the footsteps matched him exactly, one step after another, an invisible companion stalking him with eerie precision. He glanced over his shoulder, heart hammering, but the fog swallowed any shape that might have lurked there. The forest's silence remained punctuated only by the sound of these phantom steps, echoing, taunting, deliberate. Branches snapped in the distance. Leaves rustled without wind. The fog thickened, forming a wall ahead, and the whispers merged with the sounds around him, now forming fragmented words. "Do not turn, you cannot leave, they follow." The forest had a voice, and it was insistent, layered, overwhelming, pressing directly against his mind with the weight of something patient, ancient, and aware. Every attempt to double back only led him deeper into the maze of trees. Familiar landmarks had vanished entirely, replaced by a tangle of roots, rocks, and shadows that seemed to shift with each step. Shapes emerged at the periphery of his vision. Pale forms crouched behind trunks, elongated limbs stretching toward him, yet vanishing whenever he looked directly. The footsteps followed relentlessly, a heartbeat of intent threading through the darkness. He stumbled into a small clearing, torch shaking, breath ragged. Fog clung low to the ground, moving as though alive, curling around his legs and pulling at him with invisible tendrils. The footsteps stopped momentarily, leaving only the soft whisper of the wind, or was it the wind, pressing against his ears. He sensed eyes everywhere, pressed in from the shadows, tracking, measuring, waiting. A distant howl, hollow and fragmented, echoed through the trees, sending a shiver down his spine. The whispers became urgent, overlapping with the cadence of the unseen footsteps. "Do not leave. They are waiting, forever." Panic clawed at his chest, yet a part of him understood he could not turn back. The forest had claimed him, lured him deeper, and now the footsteps marked his every move, an unyielding reminder of the unseen presence that followed, patient and eternal. And then, just as suddenly as they had begun, the footsteps vanished. Silence fell, heavy and suffocating, broken only by his own labored breathing. Yet he knew they were still there, waiting in the shadows, poised to resume their pursuit the moment he faltered. The forest did not forget. It did not forgive. It watched, always, as it guided him ever deeper into its endless, twisting heart. The fog thickened with a malevolent patience, curling around tree trunks and roots like living fingers. It clung to the hiker's clothing, soaked his hair and sleeves, and blurred the world into indistinct shapes of white and gray. Every step forward felt heavy, as though the mist itself resisted him, a subtle pressure pressing from all sides. The forest had become unrecognizable, its familiar contours dissolved into a shifting labyrinth of shadow and fog. The whispers returned, low and melodic yet laced with menace. They drifted through the fog, brushing against his ears, insinuating themselves into his thoughts. Words formed and fractured before comprehension could catch them. Lost, cannot leave, watch, follow. The cadence matched the rhythm of his heartbeat, a constant, inescapable reminder that he was no longer merely moving through the forest. He was moving through something alive, something aware of him. Shapes began to flicker in the fog, almost human, crouched behind trees, peering from behind roots, yet dissolving into mist when confronted directly. Their eyes glimmered faintly, hollow yet perceptive, and he felt the weight of their gaze, cold and unyielding, tracking him, measuring him. Each step he took caused the fog to swirl and shift, as if the forest were rearranging itself around him, shaping a path towards something unknown and inevitable. The hiker stumbled over roots and uneven ground, each misstep accompanied by faint, deliberate noises. The soft snap of a twig, the scuff of something following, barely perceptible yet undeniable. The footsteps were not constant now, appearing and vanishing in the fog, teasing him, reminding him that he was never alone. He could sense them waiting, patient and deliberate, in the shadows just beyond the mist. A sudden chill settled over him, deeper than the night air, crawling through his skin and sinking into his bones. The whispers rose in urgency, overlapping into a cacophony of warning and invitation. Do not turn, forever, belong. The fog seemed to pulse in response, thickening suddenly, forming corridors and walls where none existed moments before. Every direction looked identical, every tree and shadow a mirror of another, until orientation became impossible. He reached a small clearing, though it was no sanctuary. The fog clung low, crawling over rocks and roots, and the shadows at the edges shifted, stretching and bending unnaturally. Figures seemed to emerge from the mist, half-seen, elongated, twisting as if composed of smoke and intent. The whispers intensified, threading into his mind directly, urging, warning, and claiming. "You cannot leave, watch, stay." Panic surged. He spun, torch slicing through the fog, searching for any landmark, any point of reference. The shapes flickered at the periphery, vanishing when confronted. Yet the footsteps resumed, soft, deliberate, echoing through the mist. Each step forward drew him deeper into the labyrinthine forest, the fog closing behind him like a wall, swallowing paths he had tried to retrace. And as he pressed onward, heart hammering, the fog thickened still further, a living entity that seemed to pulse with anticipation. He realized, with a chilling clarity, that the forest had decided his path, that the fog was not merely a weather phenomenon, but a guide, a sentinel, a trap. And somewhere ahead, where the mist hung heaviest, the forest waited, patient, eternal, and aware, for him to step into its hidden heart. The forest had grown oppressive, a living entity pressing in from every side. Shadows stretched unnaturally across the fog-laden ground, flickering and merging in ways that defied logic. Tree trunks twisted into impossible angles, roots writhed underfoot, and the hiker could no longer tell where solid earth ended and shadow began. Every step he took seemed guided, yet resisted, as if the forest itself was aware of his intentions and shaping them to its own will. The whispers were relentless, now forming fragmented phrases that stabbed at his mind. "You cannot leave, watch, stay, forever." They seemed to emerge from everywhere at once, from the mist curling at his ankles, from the darkness behind the trees, from the unseen canopy above. Each word vibrated with a strange urgency, threading through his consciousness and leaving a hollow chill in its wake. Shapes began to emerge more distinctly within the fog. They were not human, not animal, yet their movements mimicked life. Shadows without bodies, twisting and coiling as they advanced, bending around the trunks of ancient pines and slipping between the roots. He tried to focus on one, only to see it fragment into countless smaller shadows, all converging toward him, yet never fully forming, always just beyond the edge of perception. The forest floor itself seemed alive. Rocks shifted subtly beneath his feet. The soil squelched where no moisture existed. He stumbled over roots that appeared only at the last moment, feeling them twist beneath his weight, pulling subtly, guiding him down a path of his own uncertainty. Each misstep was echoed by the soft, deliberate footfalls that had haunted him since the beginning of his trek, footsteps that now seemed too numerous, too coordinated, to be merely imagined. The fog thickened, rising to meet him, clinging to every limb, pressing cold against his skin. The whispers became louder, layered, a chorus of intent. "Follow, do not leave, join." The shadows responded to them, stretching, advancing, curling like living smoke, surrounding him in a tightening spiral. Panic clawed at his chest, yet he felt compelled to move, compelled by a force that was not his own. A silent insistence pressing him onward into the heart of the forest. A sudden movement in the periphery of his vision froze him. A shape, darker than the surrounding fog and shadows, detached itself from the mist and advanced silently. Limbs elongated in impossible ways. It moved with the grace of a predator, yet with a deliberateness that suggested awareness far beyond instinct. The whispers intensified, embedding in his mind. "Stay, forever, witness." He stumbled backward, torch slicing erratically through the fog, illuminating glimpses of the moving shadows that now seemed to stalk him relentlessly. The footsteps behind him accelerated, yet they were not his own, echoing in rhythm with the advancing darkness. The fog swirled around him like a living thing, curling upward, pressing close, and the shadows converged, anticipating his next move. The hiker realized with dawning horror that he was no longer merely lost. He was being hunted, guided, and claimed simultaneously. Every shadow, every whisper, every subtle shift in the fog was part of a pattern he could not comprehend. He was walking into the forest's core, a place where time, space, and reality bent to its will, and where those who entered never emerged unchanged or at all. And just as the fog thickened to a near-solid wall, the shadows lunged slightly, a subtle, inescapable push forward, and he understood fully that retreat was no longer an option. The forest had chosen him, and it would not release him willingly. Through the thickening fog and twisting shadows, the hiker stumbled upon a clearing, unexpected and eerily still. At its center stood a cabin, weathered and abandoned, as though it had been waiting for him for decades. The wooden walls were blackened by age, moss crawling across every surface, windows cracked and fogged. Yet the structure exuded a presence that felt deliberate, almost sentient. The forest around it fell unnaturally silent, as if holding its breath in anticipation of his next step. He approached cautiously, every footstep sounding unnaturally loud against the soft earth, echoing faintly as though the forest itself recorded his intrusion. The door was slightly ajar, creaking in the faintest breeze, or perhaps moved by something unseen. A chill pressed in from the shadows beyond the clearing, the whispers threading directly into his mind. "Enter, you are expected forever." Every instinct screamed to turn back, yet he felt drawn forward, compelled by the presence that emanated from the cabin as if it were alive, breathing, and aware of him. Inside, the cabin was small but filled with an oppressive atmosphere. Dust coated the floorboards thickly, yet footprints appeared as if freshly made, leading toward a corner where a table and a chair waited. The air was heavy with the scent of damp wood, decay, and something faintly metallic that made his stomach churn. Shadows pooled in the corners, twisting and writhing with intent, bending the edges of the room into forms that suggested figures crouched and waiting. On the table lay a journal, bound in leather and weathered with age. Its pages were filled with handwriting frantic and erratic, accounts of wanderers who had come into the forest and never returned. Diagrams of paths that shifted, notes on figures glimpsed in the mist, warnings scrawled in a hand that trembled with fear. "Do not follow, do not enter. They are patient, they watch." He flipped through the pages, every word pressing against his mind, threading with the whispers that now filled the cabin, echoing from the corners, from the floor, and from the very walls. Suddenly, a sound. Footsteps, deliberate and soft, on the floor above. The hiker froze, heart hammering, torch shaking. The whispers surged, urgent now. "They are here. Cannot leave, join." He spun, casting light upward. The staircase, narrow and splintered, led into darkness that seemed alive, pulsing faintly as if anticipating his ascent. The cabin itself seemed to breathe, wooden walls creaking as shadows lengthened and recoiled in time with his own racing heartbeat. Compelled by both fear and a strange fascination, he climbed the stairs, each step groaning under his weight. At the top, a small loft revealed itself, empty yet charged with presence. Dust swirled in the torchlight, forming subtle shapes. Figures crouched, watching, waiting. A window, cracked and fogged, offered a glimpse of the forest outside. Yet the fog had thickened, making it impossible to see paths, trees, or anything beyond. The forest had absorbed the outside world entirely, leaving only the cabin and its uncanny inhabitants. A movement in the corner of the loft drew his gaze. A shadow stretched impossibly tall, bending over the floor, its edges indistinct. The whispers coalesced into a single, chilling phrase that seemed to resonate from the cabin itself. "Stay. You cannot leave. We are always here." The hiker realized fully that the cabin was no refuge, no shelter from the forest's intent. It was a trap, a nexus where the lost were drawn and held, a sentinel of the forest's will, alive with patient awareness. And in that moment, he understood he was not alone, and that whatever had been following him had been waiting, watching, guiding him into this place where the forest and the cabin were one. and escape was no longer possible. The hiker left the cabin behind, stepping back into the fog-laden forest, but the oppressive atmosphere persisted. The shadows moved differently now, sharper, more deliberate, and every step he took carried the faint impression of another presence, one that had been following him for longer than he realized. The forest seemed alive in a new way, breathing around him, curling around trees and roots, reshaping paths to keep him moving deeper into its domain. Footprints appeared suddenly on the soft earth ahead, not his own. They were faint yet deliberate, human in shape, yet too perfect, too synchronized with his movement to be random. He knelt, examining them with trembling hands. The prints were fresh, yet led into areas of the forest that no trail had mapped, twisting unnaturally through roots and under low-hanging branches. With each step, he realized the stranger had walked the same path he now traversed, anticipating his choices, guiding him forward, or perhaps leading him into danger. Whispers threaded through the trees, urgent and overlapping. He comes, he watches, follow. The voice or voices felt different now, as though the forest had layered another presence over its own awareness. The fog thickened, curling low to the ground, obscuring the path behind him entirely. He could no longer see where he had been, only where he was forced to go. The footsteps continued to echo in the distance, soft yet distinct, following and mirroring his own movements. Twisted shadows moved at the edge of perception. One formed a figure crouched behind a tree, elongated, pale, observing him with intent. Another seemed to glide just above the ground, vanishing when confronted, only to reappear seconds later, closer than before. The hiker's heartbeat surged as he realized he was not merely being followed by the forest's own sentience. He was being watched by someone, or something, with intent. A broken branch snapped nearby, and the footprints changed direction, leading him toward a clearing he had not noticed before. The whispers swirled around him, louder, threaded directly into his thoughts. "Do not stop. He will not wait. You cannot leave." Every instinct screamed to turn back, but the fog and the shadows made retreat impossible. The stranger had been here first, and the forest had ensured he would follow. In the clearing he saw signs. A discarded pack, a torn jacket caught on a branch, footprints circling but never leaving. Someone had been here, perhaps trapped as he now was. The realization sank deep. He was not the first to be drawn into this place, and he might not be the last. Shadows shifted across the clearing, elongating and bending unnaturally, forming shapes that resembled watchers crouched and observing. The footsteps resumed, faint but deliberate, no longer at a distance. They came from all around him, soft yet insistent, moving closer with every heartbeat. The fog thickened further, curling at his legs, pressing him onward, and the whispers became a chorus of warning and command. "Follow, do not leave, forever." He understood then that the forest and its stranger were intertwined, one guiding the other, both patient, eternal, and aware. Every movement, every step, every breath was orchestrated, and escape was no longer within his control. Ahead lay paths he could not see, figures he could not name, and the forest itself, waiting to claim him fully, just as it had claimed all those who had vanished before. The hiker stumbled into a new clearing, the fog thicker here, curling like serpents along the forest floor. Moonlight, weak and pale, filtered through the branches, casting the shadows of the surrounding pines in strange, contorted patterns. The air was heavy, charged with a subtle vibration that seemed to resonate through the ground and into his bones. Every sense screamed unease, yet a part of him compelled forward, drawn by the whispering voices that now filled the clearing entirely. The voices were different from the whispers before. They were coherent in tone, but alien in cadence, layered as if multiple beings spoke simultaneously. "Come, stay, we wait, forever." They seemed to drift from the fog itself, rising from the forest floor, curling around the trunks, pressing against his ears and threading into his thoughts. Panic surged as he realized the voices were not random. They were aware of him, targeting his mind, bending his perception of reality. Figures began to emerge from the fog, faint at first, half-formed shapes that shimmered at the edges of his vision. As his eyes adjusted, he saw them more clearly. Elongated limbs, pale and twisting faces, crouched behind trees or slinking just beyond the fog's edge. The shadows moved independently, yet with purpose, circling him in slow, deliberate arcs, as if herding him toward a destination he could not see. A sudden crack of a branch made him spin, torch slicing the darkness. Nothing appeared, yet the voices surged in intensity, a chorus threading directly into his mind. "You cannot leave, watch, join." The forest seemed to breathe around him, the fog thickening to ankle and then knee height, curling at his legs like living fingers, urging him onward. He stumbled over roots and rocks that had not been there moments before, falling to his hands and knees. The ground beneath him pulsed faintly, subtle yet unmistakable, as though alive. Shapes in the clearing coalesced briefly into forms that resembled other hikers, frozen in terror, reaching silently, faces twisted in silent pleas. Each blink of his eyes revealed new figures, new shapes, all converging toward him without sound, their presence pressing against his mind with unrelenting patience. The footsteps resumed, soft yet insistent, coming from multiple directions now. He could no longer tell if they belonged to himself, the stranger, or something else entirely. Every shadow shifted, elongated, coiling closer, and the fog responded in kind, swirling and thickening with deliberate rhythm. The voices overlapped, a cacophony of urgency and command. "Stay, forever. Do not leave." A low, guttural moan emanated from the far edge of the clearing, rising from the fog itself. The hiker froze, chest tight, breath shallow. Shapes moved toward him in synchrony with the sound, elongating, twisting, their forms both human and inhuman. The fog thickened to near impenetrable density, and the moonlight faltered, leaving him in a near-complete void punctuated only by the whispers and the pulsing of unseen footsteps. He understood then, with a chill that gripped his entire body, that the clearing was a threshold. Beyond it lay the heart of the forest, a place where reality bent and the lost became part of the forest's design. The voices called him onward, relentless, and the shadows surged closer, guiding, herding, claiming. Retreat was impossible. The path behind had vanished, swallowed by fog and intent. With a trembling hand, he forced himself to rise, stepping forward into the center of the clearing, aware that each step pulled him deeper into the forest's sentient labyrinth. The voices whispered, the shadows shifted, and the fog coiled around him, an embrace both chilling and inescapable. And in that moment he realized fully. He had entered a domain not meant for escape, where the forest itself watched, waited, and claimed all who dared to tread too far. Dusk fell unevenly over the forest, shadows stretching unnaturally, merging with the fog that had thickened into a near-solid presence. The hiker's steps faltered as the world around him seemed to bend, trees elongating, roots twisting like serpents, and the very earth beneath him pulsing with subtle movement. The whispers were relentless, now layered and insistent. "Stay, forever you belong, watch." They pressed against his mind, threading through thoughts, eroding rationality, replacing it with the raw, gnawing awareness that he was no longer in control. The clearing he had reached earlier had disappeared entirely. Paths twisted into one another, reshaping in real time, and familiar landmarks were gone. Every tree looked identical, yet subtly wrong, leaning in impossible angles or with bark that seemed to breathe faintly under the torchlight. His own footsteps echoed in strange, delayed patterns, as if the forest itself had absorbed time, stretching it, warping it, bending his sense of reality. Then he saw it, a figure standing just beyond the fog. Human-shaped at first, yet elongated, its posture unnerving, limbs bending unnaturally. It remained still, yet the hiker felt its awareness pressing into him, a consciousness both patient and intent. He took a step back, torch wavering, and the figure did not move. Instead, the fog thickened around it, curling upward like smoke, and he understood that it had always been there, waiting. The footsteps returned, faint but deliberate, surrounding him now from multiple directions. Whispers converged into a single phrase, repeating, echoing from every shadow and tree. "You cannot leave, forever join." Panic clawed at his chest. He turned in circles, trying to find an exit, any path that led back to the world he had known. Yet the forest offered none. Every path led deeper into its labyrinth, every direction identical, every shadow attentive. A low moan rose from the fog, deep and resonant, vibrating through the ground, through his bones, and into his chest. Shapes began to move toward him in silence, twisting, flowing, half-formed, their faces pale and twisted in frozen terror, reaching without touching. The hiker's breath caught in his throat as the realization sank in. These were not mere shadows. They were remnants, echoes of those who had disappeared before him, trapped and claimed, now part of the forest's sentient design. He stumbled forward, forced onward by the fog and the weight of unseen eyes pressing from all sides. The figure remained, silent, a sentinel guiding, herding, and observing. His torch flickered violently, casting long, distorted shadows across the fog, and in each flicker, he saw glimpses of other shapes moving with impossible fluidity, advancing from every direction. And then the forest fell silent, save for the faint pulse of the fog and the low vibration that resonated from the earth itself. The hiker's steps faltered. The figure advanced slightly, indistinct, yet commanding, and the whispers rose one final time, threading directly into his mind. "Stay, forever watch, belong." In that instant, as dusk fully claimed the forest, the hiker disappeared. No footprints remained, no signs of struggle, only the lingering echo of footsteps, whispers, and the pulse of the fog. The forest remained, patient and eternal, absorbing his presence into its labyrinth, folding him into its shadows. A new whisper in the chorus. Another lost soul added to its collection. Outside, night fell completely. The forest appeared unchanged to any observer. Silent, still, unremarkable. But within, it had claimed yet another, patient and eternal, awaiting the next wanderer who might stray too far from the path. Night had fully claimed the forest, thick fog curling between the trunks like living smoke. The trees loomed impossibly tall, their branches twisting toward one another, forming a canopy that blocked out the sky entirely. The air was dense, charged with a subtle vibration that resonated in the hiker's chest, pressing against his ribs, making every breath a struggle. Shadows moved constantly, flowing along the fog, coiling around roots, wrapping the forest in a pattern that was deliberate, patient, and eternal. The footprints that had guided him, that had once marked the presence of a stranger, had vanished entirely, erased by the forest's intent. The whispers continued, low and layered, a chorus of voices threading through every leaf, every branch, every shadow. "We watch, you cannot leave, forever." Each word pressed directly into his mind, eroding his sense of self, dissolving the boundary between him and the forest. He realized with cold clarity that he had become part of it. Another presence folded into the labyrinth of fog and shadow. Figures emerged faintly in the periphery, distorted shapes of pale limbs and twisting faces, shadows of those who had come before. They did not move as humans do, yet their awareness was evident. They watched silently, observing, guiding, and waiting. The hiker's torch flickered weakly, revealing glimpses of half-formed shapes crouched in the fog. Yet whenever he looked directly, they melted back into the mist. The forest itself was alive with patience, orchestrating every sound, movement, and whisper to maintain its dominion. Time no longer had meaning. Hours could have passed, or minutes. The boundaries of day and night had been erased. The hiker wandered, compelled, every step guided by the fog and the unseen eyes that followed relentlessly. Shadows curled and stretched ahead, forming corridors that led deeper into the forest's heart. He understood fully now that escape was impossible. The forest had claimed him, weaving him into its labyrinth, folding him into its whispers, his presence now a part of the unending cycle of the lost. A final, low murmur rose from the fog, a harmony of every voice he had heard since entering the forest. Stay, join, watch, forever. The shadows shifted in response, converging slowly, curling around him without touch, yet heavy with intent. The fog pulsed in rhythm with the voices, a living entity absorbing his presence, folding his consciousness into its eternal pattern. The hiker felt himself dissolve into the forest, becoming indistinct, another echo in the chorus, another shape in the mist. Outside, the forest remained still, silent to the world beyond. Paths that had once existed vanished entirely, trees rearranging themselves, fog shifting to obscure all traces of those who had disappeared. To any wanderer who might pass nearby, it seemed a normal forest, peaceful and unassuming. Yet beneath its canopy, it waited, patient, eternal, aware. The forest had secrets, and it kept them jealously, folding the lost into shadows and whispers, awaiting the next soul who would stray too far from the known path. The hiker was gone, but the forest remembered him. The whispers persisted, a soft hum within the mist, guiding, observing, claiming. And somewhere within the dense labyrinth of trees, another pair of eyes now watched, patient and eternal, waiting for the next wanderer to enter its domain, ensuring that the forest's secrets remained unbroken and forever unescapable.